As we enter into this season of autumn, I find myself longing for comfort. Every June, when the sun rolls around, I put on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and I remind myself that in just a few months' time, I'll be begging for my hoodies. And it's like clockwork. As I'm writing this, it is still 26 degrees outside, and as I'm filming this, it's still 20 degrees outside. And frankly, I'm getting a little pissed off that I can't just throw in a blanket and feel super cozy. So, in defiance of Mother Nature, today we're talking about one of my favorite times of year, fall. And along with fall comes one of my favorite practices, Hygge. So what is Hygge, you might ask, or most likely you'll be asking. The word Hygge directly translates from Danish to English as coziness, although it is much more than this. From Norwegian origin, Hygge is both a Danish and Norwegian practice that encourages the cherishing of life through all your senses. At its core, Hygge is really about appreciating the small things, and it's characterized by making small additions in your life that improve your overall satisfaction and comfort and joy. Mike Viking, the author of the Little Book of Hygge, gives Hygge as an example of something that the Danes feel is just a part of their culture, just as an American would view freedom. Growing up with a Danish background, Hygge is a word that I've heard throughout my family, more so in the last couple years of my life, and my experience of it was always through either my parents or one of my aunts. So when I sit back and I think about what those memories meant to me, I keep coming back to the feeling of invitation being one of the strongest parts of the memory. It was an invitation to come and sit and talk and feel welcome and wanted in that space. It was an invitation to just come and have a coffee or a tea over candlelight. Now, the easy response to this is, so you're just relaxing? And that has been what most of North American culture has made of it. But we lack to acknowledge the fact that it's far more than that. The phones are away, the space feels safe, and you feel cared for. I think that the care is the biggest difference for me. It's the act of being present. There's a misconception in North America that Hygge is a way of living, like a philosophy that all the Danes follow. However, it's much more relaxed than that. It's more of just a word that's used to describe a time that was cherished very deeply, that was spent with people you love or was spent doing something that you love. And I found this interesting because, of course, living outside of Denmark, other than my family's impact on me, my idea of Hygge is very much built off a strong marketing campaign. So of course I romanticize this idea, the idea of leading your life in such a way that every moment is lovelier. And I think that this happened because living in North America, Hygge would absolutely be a lifestyle change. So it makes sense that over here we just assume it's more of this philosophy to live by. Because for us, it would take a very conscious choice to refocus all our priorities. It would generally have to take some kind of lifestyle change to experience Hygge more often. Life here is very much about working to live, and that's not to say that you don't find that in other countries. But after visiting a few European countries myself and learning about them in school and comparing them to my lifestyle growing up, the biggest difference I notice is how much overindulgence is such a part of North American culture. And it's almost like we're taught to see it as a positive, but the older I get, the less I feel that way. I notice just how it's stealing all the small delights of life. Having 6 massive box stores in your town is really normal, but the issue with that is it takes the love out of food, and then it takes the love out of cooking, which then takes the love out of sharing a meal. And something that I learned during my schooling of France and Germany and Italy and Spain is just how much food is a part of their culture and therefore their community and their lifestyle. And this is just one of the things I feel like we lack here. The influx of a fast food restaurant on every corner that you drive by, it promotes this idea of now, 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 and this fast-paced lifestyle. And the older I get, the more I notice that my heart just does not align with this. which is why I think the idea of Hygge has sold so well to other countries, and why social media has almost taken it and made it trendy per se, because it is much more idealistic than the actual lives we generally live. And it's funny because even to this day, we get Hygge wrong here. Rather than a practice that we can incorporate into our lives, it's a box of items that we're being sold. A hand soap, slippers, spiced cookies. We have this innate desire to market things to each other, but that defeats the exact point of Hygge. Hygge is time away from the busyness, from the stress, and from the idea that what you have is not enough. Truly, what you have is enough. The candles in your drawer, the blanket at the back of the cupboard, the flour, sugar, baking powder, baking soda, and eggs that are all essentials in your house, and your family and friends. The dangerous part about being online is that things very quickly become trends and lose their actual meaning. So the aspects that will actually bring good change into your life have been diluted. When you live in this culture that's constantly focused on the next big thing, the next iPhone, the next micro trend, it's exhausting because you're always chasing. So the danger we face in seeing Hygge as a trend is that we miss the point. Another misconception about Hygge is that it's only for fall/winter or the darker months. And this is the one that really shook me, because I specifically saved this episode for fall before I did any research on it, because I always think about Hygge in the fall, in the winter time. However, once I went into doing research on it, I realized that this was not the case, and that the only reason I believed that is because the practices that we do in Hygge are very much about increasing comfort, increasing peace and joy within ourselves, and we tend to need more of that in the darker months. Naturally, many of us suffer from feelings of isolation, loneliness, and seasonal depression, so I want to be very conscious of the fact that the darker months are not comforting to all of us. But this is why I love Hygge and why I really wanted to share it with you at this time of the year. Because one of the best things we can learn to do is embrace the darkness and bring a little light into our space and make it feel warm. That all being said, Hygge is practiced at all times of the year in Denmark and the other countries that practice Hygge regularly, and that's because it's generally just a word used to describe a very lovely time. So now that we have a better understanding of Hygge, join me today in slowing down and learning about its true meaning and what that can bring to our lives. When I think about Scandinavian countries, I often think about those statistics that they tend to be the happiest countries in the world. Now, of course, you can only give so much weight to a general consensus voting, but you do have to give it some weight. So I just often wonder what it is that is leading these countries to have consistent overall life satisfaction more often than other countries in our world. Now, of course, there's many, many reasons for this to be true, and I think you can already guess which one we're talking about today, and it is Hygge. But more importantly, why the values that go along with Hygge actually improve our lives, because they do. To me, the biggest components of Hygge that stand out are being present, community, and gratitude. So let's first distinguish happiness from gratitude, because I feel like they often get misconstrued in conversation. I find that we use happiness as a blanket term for many other emotions like gratitude and joy and peace, but we need to break them down because they are in fact different emotions. Gratitude is defined by Cambridge Dictionary as a strong feeling of appreciation to someone or something for what that person has done to help you. You can now see how gratitude is different from those other emotions because it actually has the tangible power to rework the way that you see and deal with life. Like it's been scientifically proven, guys. Here are just a couple of the benefits of taking part in a gratitude practice regularly. Firstly, it can help you reframe problems in your mind and give you more tools to see the perspective that life often requires. Secondly, it'll improve your social relationships because it will put you into a more welcoming space, which people will be able to feel off of you by just being around you. It also improves your immune system. You can experience lower blood pressure, therefore less stress, and you're more outgoing and forgiving, and genuinely the list just goes on and on. When we're talking about gratitude, I feel like the best way to view it is as a ripple in a pond. Gratitude has the ability to touch all aspects in your life, and the more it ripples, the more it affects different parts of what you're going through. But there's still a cause. The cause is the rock hitting the water. You have to be the person to throw that rock to start the process. But once you do, it'll touch down and it will just continue to expand into all areas of your life. I listened to the Huberman's Lab episode on gratitude and it was insanely informative and it was really, really cool. If you're someone that is interested in the neuroscience of everything, I would highly recommend you go listen to it. But today I'm going to do my best to pass along the knowledge that I learned. But I am not a neuroscientist. If that needed any clarification, I'm not even anywhere near being a neuroscientist. However, it was just so cool that I really, really want to speak on it. So I'm going to do my best to relay it so that we can all just get really excited because it's really cool information. But before we begin, we're going to define neuroplasticity so that this makes a little bit more sense. Psychology.com defines it as the brain's capacity to continue growing and evolving in response to life's experiences. Plasticity is the capacity to be shaped, molded, or altered. Neuroplasticity, then, is the ability for the brain to adapt or change over time by creating new neurons and building new networks. So essentially, in the most layman's terms possible, your brain's neural pathways have the ability to rewire themselves, which means if you can harness control, you can change your immediate thought patterns for the better. And this is what a daily gratitude practice is thought to do. However, one thing to know is that your brain can tell the difference between you actively choosing to do something and you being forced into a situation. We know this because during testing, scientists were tracking the blood pressure of rats while they ran on a wheel, and they discovered that the rat's blood pressure went down as he was running on the wheel, therefore reducing his stress. However, when things were set up in such a way that by one rat running, it forced another rat to run, they found that that rat that was being forced into running had its blood pressure rise, therefore increasing its stress. And this is important to know because it tells us that gratitude is not about forcing yourself into believing something is good when it's not good, or forcing yourself into a state of happiness, because your brain will know that it is just not true. Psychologist, professor, and author Dr. Robert Emmons believes that there are two stages to gratitude. When you're experiencing gratefulness, it's allowing your brain to acknowledge the good that is happening in your life. You're simply focused on appreciating the fact that you're just surrounded by joy. And after this comes the realization that goodness comes from outside of you. And this is the stage where gratitude actually has the ability to rework the way that you look at the world. Gratitude is ultimately about teaching your brain perspective. There's a quote from the Dead Poets Society, from the part of the movie where Mr. Keating, the teacher, is standing up on his desk, and he asks his students, "Why do I stand here?" And one of the students responds with, "To feel taller." And Mr. Keating replies, and this is what he says: "I stand on my desk to remind myself that we must constantly force ourselves to look at things differently." This is the benefit that gratitude gives us. So what is a gratitude practice then? Of course, all gratitude practices are great because it's very important and also beneficial to reflect on the good things in your life. But when we're talking about the gratitude that has been proved to help our actual health, listing off 10 things that you're grateful for is not actually the practice that is going to do that. What I learned from the Huberman's Lab episode is that the most effective gratitude practice is to actually receive gratitude. Now, this is not probably what you wanted to hear because obviously we cannot force someone to be grateful for us. And at first glance, it seems awfully unattainable to do this as a daily or, every couple days gratitude practice. However, what studies have also found is that the simple act of hearing someone tell a story where they were grateful to someone else allows us to feel that same sense of gratefulness and gratitude. So Andrew Huberman recommends either recalling back to a time in your life where someone was grateful to you, or picking a story that you heard from someone else talking about a time that they received help from someone and therefore were very grateful to them in return. And once you have this story or experience in your mind, you're going to list out what the struggle was, what the help was, and how the experience impacted you emotionally. This jot of notes, while it seems wishy-washy to us, is actually what is going to activate that part of the brain that we talked about earlier. The part of the brain that is able to look at life in a different way. Rather than just seeing something as black or white or trying to convince yourself that something that was bad is good, you will actually see the full cycle of struggle to pain to help to resolution. And reminding ourselves of these circumstances in life will greatly end up assisting us in accessing that thought process more and more often. Therefore, again, like we talked about earlier, this ripple effect. It will allow you to move through life with greater understanding and grace for difficult situations or difficult people. And I hope this made sense because it's just so cool to me. So let's just quickly go back to what Andrew Huberman shared about stories and how they connect us to other people. In life, stories end up being a really big reason in why we're able to not only relate but build relationships with other people. And in that process, it allows us to feel important emotions like empathy. Stories teach us lessons, and stories are how we teach other people lessons. They are a very big building block to how we communicate, even if we don't notice. And it conveniently brings us all the way back to Hygge. While Hygge is this picturesque idea of peace through lighting and smells and taste, and that's all true, it is also highly characterized by community. And more importantly, intentional community. Meaning that the phones are away and the focus is just on each other. When I was thinking on why community is helpful to our daily living, there was many things that came to mind. Obviously, things like survival and kinship and joy and lack of loneliness and added perspective, but the last two stuck out to me more. Obviously, the lack of loneliness is a big part of having a community. However, I do think loneliness is not so black and white. I see it more as phases that we go through in life rather than the lack of people that are around you. Don't get me wrong, I have absolutely felt lonely in times where I was alone for a chunk of time. But if I'm honest, I feel like I've probably felt the loneliest I ever have surrounded by my friends or family at a table. I find that loneliness shows up when I can't find relation to the people who are around me, when our lives don't align or I don't feel understood. So while community helps quite often with feelings of loneliness, I don't think it's the biggest reason that community is so good for us. I feel like the biggest reason is perspective. The more people that you meet from different walks of life, the easier it is to empathize. Just like the more you see of the world, the more you'll learn that maybe not every way that you were living was the exact right way to do it. So now that we understand Hygge and why it's proved to be beneficial to our lives, I want to dive into some of our senses and how Hygge can make them even better. Number one is not a sense, but I make the rules here. Number 1 is about conversation. Like we talked about in the prior section, story is such a big part of how we build relationships with the people around us. How we feel, how we teach, how we lead. And I found it just fascinating how much it connects to gratitude and therefore Hygge. It feels like we're always bringing up this idea of getting too comfortable within a romantic relationship. Like one person stops putting in as much effort into the relationship. But we really lack to acknowledge that this happens with every relationship in our life. With our parents, our friends, our family, our cousins. But when we awake to the fact that there's still so much more we get to learn about these people, it's such a lovely realization because deepening some of the most meaningful relationships in your life is life-changing. The act of asking good, intentional questions not only allows you to get to know the people around you, but also yourself. I find that my favorite questions to ask people are the ones that I as well have to think about for a long time before I have the answer. But another question that I found that I like to ask people is about their experiences with my fears. And I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but just bear with me. I think we spend a lot of our time worrying about our fears and awaiting the worst to happen, which leaves little space for rationale. But what I've found by talking through my fears is that it actually eases my anxiety. For example, I was on a long drive home with my dad a bit ago because we decided to go on basically a road trip for a show. And I was driving in a place I didn't know. It was late and it was dark and I was starting to get really sleepy. So I was trying to think of questions to ask him that I'd never asked him before. Partially because it was interesting, but also because I really needed to keep myself awake. But anyways, I realized while I was driving that I have this fear of having a car issue by myself in the middle of nowhere. The idea of facing a situation that I had no clue how to solve alone was genuinely horrifying for me. So I asked him, what's the worst car experience that you've ever had to deal with? And I know it seems like a stupid idea, but out of asking that question, I got a story that I had never heard before. And the realization that what at times is my biggest fear are situations that people work through day after day. And then one day they get to tell the story laughing. This brought so much peace to my fear and it gave it context and it really helped me. So it's something that I'm trying to do more and more often. Secondly, one of my goals this year was to be intentional about journaling, which eventually led me to writing some of my own prompts. So here are just a few questions that I asked myself that I liked answering, and I figured I'd share them in case you want to ask other people questions that you might not normally ask them. So I'm going to read some out, but I also will put a list in the description. Number 1, if you designed a music festival, who would headline each night? Number 2, if you were to live in your dream city, what would one full perfect day look like to you there? Number 3, rather than what you want to receive from a relationship, what do you think is your best trait that you can offer to a relationship? Number 4, have you ever experienced repeating patterns in your life? Did they eventually teach you something? Number 5, what's a song that has a strong memory attached to it for you? What is the memory? Number 6, if you had to pick a song that you believe everyone in your life would love, what would it be and why do you think it would appeal to everyone? Number 7, tell me about a book or a movie that changed your life in some way. And number 8, as a child, who was your first TV or movie crush? Lastly, my final suggestion is more of an activity, and I can't take credit for this because I saw it on TikTok, but because we talk about music a lot on here, I just had to mention it because I thought it was a great idea. So I saw a TikTok of a girl recommending this as a date night, but you could do it with a friend or even a group of people would be fun. And I don't know why I'd never thought of this because book clubs are so popular and dissecting films after you watch them is super popular as well. But essentially what she said is to find an album that you had never heard, everyone included, and then listen to it song by song and rate each song. And then at the end, tally up and see your kind of full score that you gave to the album and just your general thoughts on whether you liked it or whether you didn't like it. And I thought that this was such a good idea because, of course, finding new music is always fun. But more importantly, it opens the floor to a new discussion for everyone. Like, everyone is on the same playing field because nobody has heard the album before. So the second sense is setting the atmosphere. So this kind of includes a lot of stuff, I guess, but again, I make the rules here, guys. I'm a really big believer in using tools to enhance an experience. Like, I use music all the time to set an ambiance in a way. Parties, drives, dinner time, even just relaxation before bed, you name it. And lighting is the exact same thing as this. I think that one of the best feelings to feel when you go to a new place is like you're welcome there. You're welcome to settle in and stay for a while. And I don't know about you, but the places that I typically feel this are in those darker, warmer, cozier spaces. I think about all the coffee shops today designed with bright white walls and 90-degree chairs and concrete floors, and I never feel like staying. So if you're planning to have people over for Hygge, do essentially the opposite of that and you should be good. Personally, the only time that I use my overhead light is when I absolutely have to. And I've noticed that this has also become kind of a little joke on social media, is that we love to use the lamps and, candles, not the overhead light. So once I knew that it was more than just me, I knew that there had to be a scientific explanation for it. And sure enough, there is. And it's mostly based off our body's circadian rhythms, which is our body's natural 24-hour clock of waking, sleeping, and every mental, physical, or behavioral change in between. This just means that there are certain hours of the day that we are more alert and certain hours of the day that we're more calm. And it is heavily reliant on the rising and setting of the sun. Even if the sun is hidden by the clouds for you, when it rises and lights up the world, it signals to your body that it's time to get up. And then when it sets, it signals to your body that it's time to wind down and get ready to go to sleep. So of course, warm lighting is going to make us feel the coziest and most content. It's only natural. But the effect that light has on us goes further than just our natural sunlight. Blue toned light that's typically found in workplaces encourages productivity within us. Whereas soft, warm tone light, like, say, this lamp, it's not really focused in on the camera, so it's a little bit bright, but you get the point. That warm tone lighting will promote feelings of comfort and safeness, therefore putting the body in a space where it feels like it can finally relax and slow down. Something that I learned about the Danes through the little book of Hygge is that they're very intentional with the way that they use their lighting. Not only do they love candles, but they love lamps and they love the way they set them up. And I think that we can definitely take a page from their book on this one. The Danes specifically designed their house and Hygge time with pockets or pools of light. So they set up spaces that are a few candles in one place and they spread it out over the whole house. This way, everywhere you go, there's plenty of opportunities to feel cozy and indulge in Hygge. The third sense is taste. I'll be honest, if you're here to listen to me talk about food, then you're going to be very disappointed. I'm really not a foodie. Like, I'm the friend that gets chicken strips and chocolate cake at the restaurant every time. But that being said, food just cannot be ignored when we're talking about Hygge. For all of us, taste is a very important sense. It adds so much joy into our lives, and of course, this is why it's a part of Hygge. The best way to embrace food while having Hygge is by making it together. And this is because not only are you enjoying the aromas of baking or cooking, but you're also having a new experience with the people that you love. The last sense that I want to talk about is what we hear. And specifically, that's going to be music, because we cannot get away from me talking about music on this podcast, which I hope is one of the reasons you're here. But Of course, music is always subjective, but I think when we're talking about a specific feeling and experience, it's less subjective. Bottom line is that whatever you put on has to please the majority of people, which can be difficult, but it's a fun little challenge. For me, this quite often means a slower folk artist or someone along the lines of Norah Jones or every song off of Clairo's new album Charm. But I have put together a full playlist of some of my favorite songs for Hygge that I will put in the description of this podcast episode. But one other thing you can do, I really love reading and writing to those like cafe videos on YouTube. There's also podcasts for them, but essentially it's just very chill jazz music, but they add like rain sounds and they'll put in little cafe sounds. So like plates putting on the counter, a little ding for the door opening, a little bit of coffee grinding. Like, it's so cute. So I was just reading today and I realized that that would probably also add to the ambiance and be another option for background music when you're having Hygge. But I do have one shameless plug before we end today. I did film a YouTube video to go along with today's episode where I talk through some of my favorite fall musicians and a lot of the bigger artists that are in that playlist that I made for this episode. And we also make æbleskiver, one of my favorite Danish recipes. So if that's at all up your alley, it's very cozy, very chill. I just thought it would be nice to show a tangible way of how you could have Hygge by yourself, and I honestly just wanted to, it sounded fun to film, so that'll be up on Sunday. But all in all, I really hope that you took something from today's episode, because to me Hygge is such an important thing that I've been trying to keep more in the back of my head, to be more conscious of how I'm spending my time. In a stress-heavy world, we need to give ourselves the space away from busyness and away from the guilt to be doing more. You are, in fact, doing okay. I'll go back to the title of this podcast, Grow Up Slowly. There's a quote that I found on Pinterest that really resonated with me when I saw it, so I wanted to share it with you today. It says, "Wait, why are we already talking about what's next? I'm not done with right now. In fact, I was just starting to love it. The future will happen eventually. It always does. So what if we just stay here for now? Your coffee is getting cold. You had something to tell me. Just be here right now. Time will always tick, but we can learn to keep time. Be where your feet are." As always, the sources and all social media links will be in the description below. Let's let music bring us together, and don't forget to grow up slowly.